The USS Ward was a ship of unique firsts. She was named in honor of Commander James Harmon Ward, the first U.S. Navy officer to be killed in action during the American Civil War. She was built in a record of 17.5 days at the Mare Island Navy Yard in California, and she would fire the first shots of the Pearl Harbor attack. Ironically, the very same commander who ordered those shots to be fired would be the one to order the shots fired that would sink her. But our story starts 26 years prior. The year was 1918. America had been in the First World War for just over a year, and things in Europe were at a stalemate on the Western Front. In the Atlantic, Germany's policy of unrestricted submarine warfare had been taking its toll. Troop and supply ships were unable to journey on their own, and the convoy escort system was vital to the Allies. The key to these convoys were destroyers. Under the pressure of the need for more of these destroyers, her construction was pushed rapidly from keel laying on May 15, 1918, to launching on June 1 and commissioning on July 24, 1918. USS Ward was a Wickes-class destroyer. Known as Four Stacks, she was 314 feet 4 inches, with a beam of 30 feet 11 inches and a displacement of 1,267 tons. She could make 35 knots and had a complement of 231 officers and enlisted men. Her armament consisted of 4 4-inch 50 caliber guns, 2 3-inch 23 caliber anti-aircraft guns, and 12 21-inch torpedo tubes. The gun armament was standard for destroyers of the era, but the torpedo armament was unusually large, following American practice at the time. This size resulted from the General Board's preference for broadside over centerline torpedo tubes. The reasoning included the desire to retain torpedoes after a broadside and issues with centerline mounts on earlier classes, where torpedoes struck the ship's gunnels during firing. Anti-submarine warfare armament was introduced during World War I, usually consisting of a single depth charge track at the stern and a Y-gun depth charge launcher positioned ahead of the aft deckhouse. The Wickes-class had limited range with wet bridge and gun positions. The fleet discovered that its tapered stern, designed for efficient depth charge deployment, caused the ship to dig into the water, increasing the turning radius and hindering anti-submarine operations. After completing shakedown and training, Ward departed the West Coast on December 2, 1918. As the flagship of Destroyer Division 18, she participated in the annual winter exercises near Guantanamo Bay. In May 1919, Ward assisted with navigation and lifeguard duties for the transatlantic flight of the Curtiss NC flying boats. Stationed off Newfoundland, Ward supported the first leg of the journey from Newfoundland to the Azores, maintaining a position 50 miles from her sister ships, Boggs and Palmer. In July 1919, Ward was part of the first nest of destroyers to pass through the Panama Canal locks as the fleet transitioned from the Atlantic to the Pacific. After completing the transit, Ward sailed north and stopped at Acapulco, Mexico. For the rest of July and into August, she visited various California ports, including San Diego, San Pedro, San Luis Obispo, Monterey, San Francisco, and Eureka, before continuing north to Portland. On September 13, 1919, Ward was among the fleet ships reviewed by President Woodrow Wilson in Seattle. She remained in the Pacific until she was decommissioned in July 1921. Ward was recommissioned on January 15, 1941 at the Naval Destroyer Base in San Diego with Lieutenant Commander Hunter Wood, Jr. in command. After completing provisioning and fueling, the ship departed for Hawaii, entering the open Pacific on February 28 and enduring heavy rolling and pitching during the journey. She arrived at Pearl Harbor on March 9th, joining the 14th Naval District's Local Defense Forces and Des Div 80. This division was tasked with patrolling the channel entrance to Pearl Harbor, a critical duty given the Pacific Fleet's role in deterring Japan's imperial ambitions in the Far East. Throughout 1941, Ward carried out routine anti-submarine patrols in the Hawaiian area. As tensions with Japan escalated after the oil embargo in July 1941 and the rise of the Tojo cabinet in October, Washington sent a war warning in late November 1941 to force commanders in the Hawaiian and Philippine areas, urging heightened vigilance for potential Japanese hostile actions. Consequently, Admiral Husband E. Kimmel, Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet, directed the inshore patrol to depth charge any suspicious submarine contacts within the defensive sea areas. Operating under orders to shoot to kill, Ward and her consorts maintained their mission, now adopting a wartime posture. Utilizing listening gear, Ward persisted in her vigilant patrols through the inshore zones, methodically tracing figure-8 patterns within a 2-mile radius of the channel entrance buoys. Each weekend, one of the old four pipers took on the duty, and it was soon Ward's turn. Ward got underway at 6:30 a.m. on December 6th, following a change of command the previous day. The ship's new commander, Lieutenant William W. Outerbridge, was taking on his first command. Under heavy cloud cover and a waning moon on December 7th, Condor and Crossbill slowly patrolled back and forth near the channel entrance. At 3:42 a.m., Condor's officer of the deck, Ensign Russell G. McCoy, noticed a suspicious phosphorescent wake 50 yards ahead on the port bow. After confirming the sighting with Quartermaster R.C. Utrecht and Seaman First Class R.B. Chavies, McCoy concluded that the wake was caused by a periscope and what appeared to be the conning tower of a small submarine, something none of them had encountered before. Regardless, it was clear the object wasn't supposed to be there. Condor altered course to avoid the object, and the submarine veered away as well. At 3:57 a.m., Condor transmitted a message to Ward via yardarm blinker and clear voice radio. Sighted submerged submarine on westerly course, speed 9 knots. The message was picked up by the naval radio station at Bishop's Point, where a 24-hour communications watch had only recently been implemented. However, it went unnoticed by the 14th Naval District Communications Watch because the lieutenant on duty was asleep. On Ward, the officer of the deck, Lieutenant Junior Grade Oscar Gupner, also the ship's gunnery officer, immediately alerted Outerbridge, who ordered general quarters at 4:08 a.m. In the following minutes, Condor and Ward exchanged information via clear voice radio. A key report from Condor noted that the submarine contact was just 1,000 yards from the channel entrance, heading toward it, and had last been seen at 3:50 a.m. Despite searching the area visually and with sonar, Ward found no trace of the submarine. After the unsuccessful search, Ward contacted Condor at 4:30 a.m. for an update, but Condor reported no further sightings. At 4:35 a.m., Ward secured from general quarters but continued to patrol and search the area. Bishop's Point monitored and logged the communications, and other stations on the island should have intercepted them via the recently established dedicated frequency for submarine activity in the defensive sea area. However, neither Condor nor Ward filed a formal report with the 14th Naval District. Given the numerous submarine sightings in recent weeks, all either false alarms or unverified, the duty officer at Bishop's Point assumed this was another false alarm, especially since Ward had found no contact. Believing the 14th Naval District Communications Watch had also been monitoring, the duty officer did not forward a specific report. At 4:58 a.m., the anti-submarine net boom was opened to allow the two minesweepers to return to Pearl Harbor, with Crossbill entering first at 5:08 a.m., followed by Condor. Since opening and closing the barrier was a lengthy process, standard procedure was to leave it open if other ships were expected. The general cargo ship Antares was scheduled to arrive at 6 a.m. However, Antares never entered Pearl Harbor on December 7th, but the barrier remained open in anticipation, leaving the channel unprotected and providing an opportunity for the midget submarines, if they could navigate to the entrance in the dark. At 6:05 a.m., Ward made visual contact with the general cargo ship Antares and confirmed her identity using flashing light signals. On her return journey to Pearl Harbor, Antares was escorted by the destroyer Selfridge. Along the way, there were several potential submarine sightings, and the crew of Antares suspected they were being shadowed by a submarine. Given that the southern group of Japanese submarines had reached Kwajalein Atoll in the Marshall Islands on November 20th, refueled, and departed on November 23rd toward Pearl Harbor, it's plausible that one of these submarines could have crossed paths with Antares. As Selfridge was running low on provisions, she was permitted to proceed ahead of the group as they neared Oahu, arriving at Pearl Harbor on December 6th. At 6:15 a.m., Patrol Squadron 14 began launching 3 PBY-5 Catalina flying boats from Naval Air Station Kaneohe to search the southern and western approaches to Pearl Harbor. U.S. Naval Intelligence, through communications traffic analysis, had detected the buildup of Japanese submarines at Kwajalein, located southwest of Pearl Harbor, making it the most likely vector for a submarine attack and the primary focus of the search. Additionally, poor weather conditions north of Oahu, marked by a dense cloud deck, further reinforced the decision to concentrate efforts in these areas. At 6:30 a.m., Antares reached a rendezvous point about a mile outside the Pearl Harbor Channel entrance to transfer her barge to a tug. However, no tug was present. Antares began a slow turn eastward to mill about smartly while waiting. At this moment, several events occurred almost simultaneously. During the turn, Antares' lookout spotted an object 1,500 yards off the starboard quarter, positioned between the ship and the barge. Commander Grannis, though unfamiliar with its design, quickly identified the object as a submarine. At this moment, Ward's helmsman, Seaman Second Class Herbert Rayubig, spotted an object trailing behind Antares about a mile away. He pointed it out to the quartermaster of the watch, Seaman Second Class Donald Gruning, who used binoculars to examine it. Gruning believed it resembled the conning tower of a small submarine and informed the officer of the watch, Lieutenant Junior Grade Gopner. Initially dismissing it as a buoy, Gopner quickly revised his assessment as the object appeared to be moving. He summoned Outerbridge, who arrived promptly on the bridge, still dressed in pajamas and a Japanese kimono. Ward acknowledged Antares' alert with the response, "We have visual." At 6:40 a.m., Outerbridge ordered general quarters, and Ward's crew manned their battle stations for the second time that morning. As Antares and Ward exchanged signals, the sharp-eyed co-pilot of a recently launched VP-14 PBY Catalina flying boat, Ensign Robert B. Clark, spotted the submarine. The pilot, Ensign William P. Tanner, was initially skeptical, doubting it was a submarine, and then assumed it must be a U.S. vessel in distress. Tanner made a low-altitude pass over the area and released 2 smoke floats to mark the submarine's position. Outerbridge commanded, "All ahead full," and Ward surged from 5 to 25 knots, steering a course of 125 degrees. Initially considering a ramming maneuver, Outerbridge dismissed the idea, knowing that the submarine's reinforced steel hull was far tougher than the thin skin of the World War I-era destroyer. By 6:45 a.m., Ward had closed to within 300 yards, with the submarine on a reciprocal course. The 2 vessels would pass starboard to starboard at a high combined speed. The submarine showed no signs of detecting Ward's approach. Outerbridge issued the order to fire, and at a range of about 100 yards, Ward's forward 4-inch gun fired a round that sailed just over the submarine's conning tower and splashed into the water beyond. As the submarine passed alongside Ward, the starboard side 4-inch gun managed to fire 1 round before its firing arc was obstructed at an extremely close range of approximately 50 yards. The shell, too close to properly arm its fuse, failed to detonate but struck directly at the base of the submarine's conning tower, a hit witnessed by numerous crew members. Ward veered to starboard as the submarine rolled sharply in the same direction. Outerbridge promptly ordered a depth charge attack as the submarine passed astern. With 4 sharp blasts of the ship's whistle as the signal, 4 depth charges, or ash cans, set for a 100-foot depth, were released from the stern racks. The charges detonated beneath the submarine, which rolled over, sank, and did not resurface. Observing Ward's engagement with the submarine, Ensign Tanner in the PBY conducted 2 passes, releasing a depth charge on each run over the submarine's position. By 6:47 a.m., the attack was complete. 4 minutes later, Outerbridge made a clear voice radio transmission to the 14th Naval District Watch. "We have dropped depth charges upon sub-operating in defensive sea area." Outerbridge immediately realized that the transmission did not adequately reflect the confidence that Ward had attacked a genuine submarine. Ships had dropped depth charges on contacts in the area before with no confirmation of an actual submarine. Firing on a submarine was something new and different. At 6:53 a.m., Outerbridge sent the following message, acknowledged and logged by Bishop's Point. USS Ward to COM 14. Have attacked, fired upon, and dropped depth charges upon unidentified submarine operating in defensive sea area. Almost every account ends at this point, but there was more to the message. A direct hit from our No. 3 gun on his conning tower, followed up with 4 ash cans. Oil slick 300 yards astern, visible on surface. Lieutenant William W. Outerbridge, CO USS Ward. This series of messages woke up the 14th Naval District's Communications Watch Officer. Immediately after attacking the midget submarine, Antares sighted a white, Japanese-style sampan at 6:48 a.m., only 500 yards away, intruding into the defensive sea area. Ward diverted to investigate while simultaneously transmitting reports about the submarine engagement. The sampan initially ignored bullhorn commands to stop, prompting Outerbridge to order his gunner's mates to fire a few rifle shots across its bow. This action brought the sampan to a halt as its master waved a white flag. Ward then radioed the Coast Guard, requesting a cutter to escort the vessel out of the area. This transmission caused confusion in the chain of command as some officers assessing Ward's submarine attack reports assumed that chasing a sampan indicated the submarine threat might not have been serious. Rear Admiral Edwin Layton later criticized Outerbridge for failing to file a detailed report, noting that valuable time was lost in the subsequent notification process as officers sought confirmation. This raises an important question. Was Outerbridge's full message relayed up the chain of command, or only the initial portion, which is the part most commonly cited in sources? Ensign Tanner's PBY also observed the oil slick and at 7 a.m. transmitted a coded message to Commander Task Force 3 and Commander Patrol Wing 1. According to the new ROE, Tanner's message should have been sent in the clear. Pat Wing 1 acknowledged promptly, but TF3 did not respond for 15 minutes, asking for confirmation. Tanner replied in the clear, sunk 1 enemy sub 1 mile south of Pearl Harbor. At 7 a.m., HA-19 had begun moving toward the Pearl Harbor entrance, but failed to arrive before the air attack began. Sakamaki later claimed he had sighted Ward and could have attacked, but chose to conserve his torpedoes for larger warships. The other midget submarines were likely operating in the vicinity of the Pearl Harbor Channel entrance during Ward's engagement. At 7:03 a.m., Ward detected another submarine via sonar, initiated an attack run at 7:05 a.m., and deployed additional depth charges at 7:06 a.m. Shortly after, a black oil slick was observed 300 yards astern. Throughout the day, Ward conducted multiple depth charge attacks on suspected submarine contacts, ultimately expending a total of 172 depth charges. On that Sunday morning, Ward earned the distinction of firing the first American shot in anger of the Pacific War. For the rest of the year, the venerable destroyer continued her district patrols where anything moving underwater became a target. As Outerbridge later reflected, Ward and her sisters likely killed plenty of fish. However, with newer, more advanced destroyers and purpose-built sub-chasers joining the fleet, some of the old, flush-decked four-pipers were reassigned to other roles, tending seaplanes, laying or sweeping mines, or serving in a new capacity, carrying fully equipped troops for assault landings as fast transports. Ward sailed to Bremerton, Washington for conversion into a high-speed transport at the Puget Sound Navy Yard. Over the following months, the old four-piper underwent significant changes. Her forward funnels were removed, and the forward boiler and fire rooms were repurposed to house troops. Modern anti-aircraft weapons, 3-inch 50s and 20mm Oerlikons, replaced the outdated iron-sighted single-purpose 4-inch guns and 50-caliber machine guns. She was also equipped with 4 sets of davits and 4 36-foot landing craft to deploy embarked troops. Fully refitted, Ward was redesignated APD-16 and set sail for the South Pacific on the 6th of February 1943. Stationed at Espiritu Santo, Ward took on diverse roles, including anti-submarine patrols, escort missions, and transport duties, while honing her capabilities as a fast transport. After completing a run to the Russell Islands, Ward approached Tulagi on the afternoon of April 7, 1943, as Japanese aircraft roared overhead during Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto's final planned Operation I, an airstrike aimed at crippling American naval power in the Solomons following Japan's withdrawal from Guadalcanal. At 3:10 p.m., Ward sounded general quarters and opened fire, surging out of the harbor, ready for combat. Amid the chaotic exchange of gunfire, the ship contributed to downing 2 Japanese planes. When the battle's toll was assessed, the Navy had lost Aaron Ward and Kanawha. Continuing her escort and transport duties into June, Ward helped repel a Japanese air attack near Guadalcanal on the 16th, with her gunners claiming 4 enemy planes. A week later, on June 23rd, Ward was screening a convoy on escort duty when Japanese submarine R-0103, under Lieutenant Rikinosuke Ichimura, evaded the screen and torpedoed 2 cargo ships, Aludra and Deimos. These would be Ichimura's only successful attacks of the war. As part of Transport Division 22, Ward departed at 6:01 a.m. on January 1, 1944, heading for Cape Sudist. That afternoon, she joined the Western Assault Group en route to Sidor, New Guinea, and continued toward British New Guinea. The next day at 6:15 a.m., Ward neared the transport area, as escorting destroyers began firing on beach targets and enemy defenses 30 minutes later. After disembarking Company L, Worst 26th Army Infantry Regiment, 32nd Division, Ward remained offshore. The destroyer bombardment ended at 7:17 a.m., and 1 minute later, landing craft strafed the beachfront jungle with machine guns and automatic weapons. Heavy smoke and dust from the bombardment obscured the landing from Ward's position offshore. In August, Ward carried out local transport duties before departing for an overhaul in Australia. On the morning of August 9th, en route, heavy seas tore a 3-inch ready-use locker from the forward deck and created a small hole in the main deck. Temporary repairs were completed later that day, and Ward arrived at Port Jackson, Sydney on August 12th, remaining there for 10 days. While sailing to Milne Bay with Herbert, Schley, Crosby, and Kilty, the group reduced speed to 5 knots due to an emergency appendectomy aboard Schley. They later resumed normal speed and arrived at Milne Bay August 27th. Completing repairs by October 1st, Ward moved to Cape Cretin to load stores, ammunition, and 7 officers with 140 enlisted men from Companies E and F of the 6th Army Ranger Battalion for transport to the Philippines. Departing on the 12th with British minelayer transport HMS Ariadne serving as fleet guide, she proceeded via Humboldt Bay. Approaching Dinagat Island on the 17th, Ward went to general quarters at 5:58 a.m. as a Japanese aircraft dropped a white flare illuminating the entire formation. Initiating evasive maneuvers, the fast transport advanced toward the troop disembarkation points while Lang and Bisbee began shore bombardment. The boats faced significant challenges after launching. High winds, rough seas, and hazardous coral reefs created obstacles, with no sheltering lee and winds blowing directly toward the beach. After landing their troops, Ward's boats returned to Ariadne to pick up more troops, while Schley's boats came alongside to load Ranger Company F from Ward. Meanwhile, Ward struggled to stay within the swept channel as strong tidal currents combined with high winds and seas repeatedly threatened to drag her anchor. 3 of Ward's boats became stranded on the beach, with one successfully pulled off by Schley's boats while the other 2 remained overnight. A 4th boat, unable to return to Ward, was hoisted aboard Schley before nightfall, while Schley's boat, which had assisted in refloating one of Ward's, was taken aboard Ward. The next morning, Ward returned to the transport area and resumed unloading supplies for the Army Rangers. While doing so, the ship spotted 2 Japanese VALs flying over the hills of Dinagat Island. Quickly going to general quarters, Ward opened fire. One plane strafed the transports but was driven off, while the second, staying at 3,000 feet, retreated without attacking after witnessing its companion's failure. Tragedy struck Ward en route to Castle Roads in the palace when a lifeline gave way, sending 2 men overboard. Turning starboard, Ward maneuvered to assist as crew members tossed life jackets to those in the water. Herbert, traveling alongside, approached, and one of her crew dove overboard to rescue one of Ward's sailors. Tragically, the other sailor disappeared. Ward's war diary grimly noted, "Sharks were seen in the vicinity." After an unsuccessful search called off at 4:45 p.m., Ward continued her journey, listing the missing man as presumed lost. While refueling at Castle Roads, Ward received orders to join Kilty in escorting 3 LSTs to the Philippines. Traveling via Morotai, Ward, her sister ship, and their convoy arrived in Leyte Gulf at 12:45 a.m. on November 12th. At 4:54 a.m., Ward went to general quarters, detached the LSTs to continue toward Dulag Bay anchorage, and observed anti-aircraft fire over San Pedro Bay as a Japanese air attack targeted the invading American fleet. Ward remained on standby, observing as a Japanese plane struck by anti-aircraft fire from an LST trailed smoke before crashing into the sea, narrowly missing the path of the recently detached beach-bound LSTs. The retaliatory strike subsided temporarily, but upon receiving reports of 50 to 60 Japanese aircraft approaching the transport area, Ward went to general quarters from 7:08 a.m. to 7:50 a.m. After the all clear was sounded, the ship stood down but returned to general quarters at 1:35 p.m., when several Japanese aircraft resumed their assault on American shipping. Intense anti-aircraft fire quickly brought down 2 enemy planes, while 2 others crashed into the repair ships Egeria and Achilles. That evening, Ward received orders to escort a convoy to Hollandia and departed the area. Arriving at San Pedro Bay on November 28th with a 5-column, 15-ship convoy, Ward anchored in Leyte Gulf on the 29th and 30th, preparing for the upcoming Mindoro landings. Despite several air raid alerts during this time, Ward's log noted no sightings of enemy aircraft. Frequent air raid alerts during this time created challenges for fleet personnel involved in the landing operations, requiring nearly continuous watches. On December 6th, Ward embarked 4 officers and 104 enlisted men from the Army's 77th Division and departed for Ormoc Bay, Leyte Island at 12:37 p.m. with TG 78.3. With reports of enemy aircraft in the area, Ward went to general quarters while en route to Ormoc Bay. At 1:53 a.m., Ward observed a cluster of flares to the west of Himukitan Island along Leyte's west coast. At 4:45 a.m., another flare was sighted ahead of the convoy. Anti-aircraft fire lit up the sky as a suspected Japanese float plane passed along the starboard side, escaping unscathed despite intense fire. Additional flares dropped around the convoy just before sunrise suggested an imminent attack, but no Japanese planes appeared. At 6:30 a.m., the escorting destroyers departed the screen to begin shore bombardment, and 12 minutes later, Ward started disembarking her troops onto the beach using her LCPRs. While on screening patrol between Thompson Island and Lady starting at 8:25 a.m., Ward spotted a formation of 9 twin-engine Bettys approaching from the north over Leyte at an altitude of 4,000 to 5,000 feet. The ship began high-speed, evasive maneuvers and opened fire with her guns, though no hits were observed. Shortly before 10 a.m., another group of planes attacked Mahan, and Ward's lookouts reported the destroyer billowing thick gray and black smoke. Ward came under intense attack by Bettys and Oscars, battling alongside Mahan as both ships fought for survival. Army P-38s and Curtiss P-40s streaked in to intercept the attackers, engaging the Japanese over the beleaguered Mahan. The 9 Bettys soon split their formation, with 3 veering toward Ward in a loose V. Ward's gunners unleashed her 3-inch and 20mm batteries, filling the sky with flak. The center plane took a direct hit, wavered, and crashed into Ward at the waterline at 9:56 a.m., penetrating the forward boiler room and the lower troop space. One of the plane's engines continued through the ship, exiting at the waterline on the starboard side. Moments later, another Betty strafed Ward's forecastle before crashing into the sea 200 yards off her starboard bow, brought down by Ward's gunfire. The third attacker targeting the transport met the same fate as its partners, crashing 600 yards off the starboard quarter. Meanwhile, the bomber that struck Ward exploded, igniting uncontrollable fires in the troop spaces, fortunately empty at the time, and in the fire room. Boiler fires surged and the forced draft blower, knocked loose from its mounting, tumbled into the fire room. Ceasing fire at 9:57 a.m., all hands turned to battling the fires as the air attack suddenly ceased. In the distance, Mahan burned intensely, having suffered a severe and devastating assault. Aboard Ward, the fires amidships had cut off communication between the forward and aft sections of the ship. Thick smoke billowed from the grievous wound in the fast transport's midsection. Minutes after the explosion, water pressure dropped below 100 pounds, making it nearly impossible to direct water onto the fires. The ship lost momentum as the flames amidships raged uncontrollably. Thick smoke pouring from the damaged troop spaces and fire room rendered the suction hoses for the gasoline-powered handy billies and the asbestos suit stowage, both located amidships, inaccessible. To reduce the smoke density, the awning over the well deck was cut away, but the area amidships remained impassable. 2 boats were lowered to fight the fires through the holes in the hull created by the Betty's impact and exit. Unfortunately, the handy billies in the LCPRs proved insufficient to combat the gasoline-fed inferno. At 10:15 a.m., O'Brien, Saunter, Scout, and Crosby approached Ward. Scout and Crosby lowered boats to rescue survivors. Meanwhile, with the main communication systems disabled, a report was sent to the other ships via a battery-powered radio. Ward's commanding officer, Lieutenant R.E. Parwell, announced plans to abandon ship if the fires could not be contained. O'Brien, under the command of Lieutenant Commander Outerbridge, who had led Ward during her historic engagement with a Japanese midget submarine exactly 3 years earlier, moved alongside to port and began firefighting efforts at 10:18 a.m. By this time, the fires in the troop spaces had spread, igniting fuel tanks and diesel oil storage. The fire room filled with thick black smoke, making it impossible to regain steam pressure to get underway. Flames engulfed the main deck near the 20mm ready-use ammunition lockers. With the imminent risk of explosions from fuel tanks, ammunition, and magazines, Farwell ordered abandon ship at 10:24 a.m., less than 30 minutes after the Japanese plane struck. Remarkably, only 1 man was injured, and the entire crew safely evacuated to nearby vessels. Saunders joined O'Brien in attempting to extinguish the blaze, but the fire resisted all efforts to bring it under control. Commander TG 78.3 directed O'Brien to scuttle the burning fast transport with gunfire. The ships moved to a safe distance and O'Brien opened fire. From O'Brien's bridge, Lieutenant Commander Outerbridge watched as the destroyer's guns sank Ward, his first sea command. Reflecting years later, he recalled the lack of sentiment. It was simply something that had to be done. Ward sank at 11:30 a.m. on December 7, 1944, in Ormoc Bay between Poro Island and Apolli Point. Remarkably, no men died and only a few received injuries during the evacuation. USS Ward earned 1 battle star for her service as a destroyer and 8 more as a fast transport. Ward's No. 3 4-inch 50 caliber gun was removed during her conversion to a high-speed transport. In 1958, the year of Minnesota's centennial, it was installed as a memorial at the Minnesota State Capitol in St. Paul, recognizing the Minnesota Naval Reserve members who fired it on December 7, 1941. In early December 2017, Ward's wreckage was located by RV Petrel in 686 feet of water.